The morning sun cast golden rays across Windsor Castle as Queen Consort Camilla stood before her ornate dressing room mirror. Royal Ascot Week had arrived, and today marked one of the most anticipated events in the British social calendar. The sound of horses' hooves echoed from the nearby stables where thoroughbreds were being prepared for the day's races. Camilla's personal dresser, Margaret, carefully arranged the final touches of her outfit. The Queen Consort had chosen an elegant cream-colored dress with delicate lace detailing, perfectly complemented by a matching coat. But the true centerpiece of her ensemble was the magnificent hat perched gracefully on her head. The hat was a work of art created by Philip Tracy, one of London's most celebrated milliners. It featured an intricate design of ivory silk roses intertwined with delicate feathers, all artfully arranged on a wide-brimmed base. Tiny pearls caught the light as they dangled from silk ribbons, creating an almost ethereal effect. The creation had taken weeks to complete and was valued at over £15,000. "Your Majesty, you look absolutely radiant," Margaret said as she made final adjustments to the hat's positioning. The headpiece was secured with several long hat pins, each topped with small crystals that sparkled like diamonds. Despite its elaborate design, the hat felt surprisingly light on Camilla's head. King Charles appeared in the doorway, resplendent in his morning dress complete with top hat and tails. His eyes immediately went to his wife's stunning appearance. "My dear, you look magnificent," he said with genuine admiration. "That hat is truly spectacular. Philip has outdone himself this time." The couple made their way through the castle corridors, past portraits of monarchs who had attended Royal Ascot for generations. Staff members lined the hallways, offering respectful bows and curtsies as the royal couple passed. The excitement in the air was palpable, as Royal Ascot represented one of the most prestigious social events of the year. Outside, the royal carriage awaited them. The gleaming black landau had been polished to perfection, and the horses stood proudly in their ceremonial harnesses. The coachman, dressed in his scarlet livery, tipped his hat respectfully as the king and Queen Consort approached. As they settled into the plush velvet seats, Camilla carefully adjusted her hat to ensure it wouldn't be disturbed during the journey. The route to Ascot Racecourse would take them through Windsor Great Park, where thousands of spectators would line the roads, hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal procession. The carriage began its stately progress, wheels crunching softly on the gravel drive. Camilla waved graciously to the gathered crowds, her hat remaining perfectly positioned despite the gentle swaying of the carriage. The morning breeze was mild, carrying the sweet scent of blooming roses from the castle gardens. "I do hope the weather holds," Camilla remarked, glancing at the clear blue sky overhead. The meteorological reports had predicted perfect conditions, but she knew how quickly British weather could change. Her hat, while beautiful, wasn't designed to withstand a sudden downpour or strong winds. As they approached the racecourse, the excitement became even more evident. Hundreds of racegoers in their finest attire filled the roads leading to Ascot. Ladies displayed elaborate hats and fascinators while gentlemen sported traditional morning dress. The annual fashion competition was as much a part of Royal Ascot as the horse racing itself. The royal enclosure came into view, its pristine white buildings gleaming in the sunlight. Union Jack flags fluttered from flagpoles, and the famous Royal Ascot banner stretched across the main entrance. The sound of a brass band playing ceremonial music drifted across the grounds. Security personnel discreetly took their positions as the royal carriage made its final approach. Photographers with long telephoto lenses positioned themselves strategically, ready to capture every moment of the royal arrival. The fashion editors for major magazines and newspapers were particularly focused on Camilla's outfit, especially her show-stopping hat. "Nearly there, my dear," Charles said as the carriage slowed. Camilla touched her hat lightly, ensuring everything was still in perfect place. She had no idea that within hours, this beautiful creation would become the center of a dramatic incident that would be talked about for years to come. The carriage drew to a stop at the royal entrance, and Camilla prepared to step into one of the most memorable days of her royal career. The royal carriage came to a gentle halt at the prestigious royal enclosure entrance. A red carpet had been rolled out, flanked by perfectly groomed flower arrangements featuring white roses and purple irises. The queen consort took a deep breath as she prepared to step down from the carriage, her magnificent hat catching the afternoon sunlight. A liveried footman stepped forward to assist her descent. Camilla gracefully extended her gloved hand and carefully maneuvered out of the carriage, mindful of her elaborate headpiece. The crowd of onlookers erupted in polite applause as she appeared, their cameras clicking rapidly to capture every detail of her stunning ensemble. "Your Majesty, welcome to Royal Ascot," greeted Sir Francis Brooke, the chief executive of Ascot Racecourse. He bowed deeply, his own top hat gleaming in the sun. Behind him stood a reception line of dignitaries, race officials, and special guests, all eager to be presented to the royal couple. Camilla smiled warmly as she moved along the reception line, exchanging pleasantries with each person. Her hat remained perfectly positioned, the silk roses seeming to flutter gently in the mild breeze. Fashion photographers captured every angle, already composing their headlines about the queen consort's impeccable style. The royal couple made their way toward the royal box, a glass-fronted enclosure that offered the best views of the racecourse. The interior was elegantly appointed with comfortable seating upholstered in royal blue fabric, crystal champagne flutes arranged on silver trays, and fresh flower arrangements that complemented Camilla's outfit. "The first race begins in 30 minutes, Your Majesty," informed the racecourse manager as he handed Charles the official race program. The king studied the list of horses and jockeys while Camilla settled into her seat, carefully positioning herself so her hat wouldn't obstruct the view of those seated behind her. Through the large windows, they could see the parade ring where the first racehorses were being led around by their handlers. Jockeys in colorful silks chatted with trainers while owners nervously checked their watches. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as betting odds were announced over the public address system. Lady Sarah Pemberton, a longtime friend of Camilla's, approached the royal box wearing her own impressive fascinator adorned with peacock feathers. "Camilla, darling, you look absolutely divine," she exclaimed. "That hat is simply breathtaking. Philip Tracy has truly created a masterpiece." The two women began discussing the day's fashion highlights, pointing out various attendees' outfits visible from their elevated position. In the general enclosure below, thousands of racegoers milled about in their finery, creating a sea of colorful hats and elegant dresses. "I do hope Princess Anne arrives soon," Camilla mentioned, glancing at her delicate gold watch. "She's always so knowledgeable about the horses. Her insights make the races far more enjoyable." As if summoned by her words, Princess Anne appeared at the entrance to the royal box, dressed in a practical yet elegant navy outfit topped with a simple but sophisticated hat. Known for her no-nonsense approach to fashion, she provided an interesting contrast to Camilla's more elaborate ensemble. "Good afternoon, Your Majesties," and said with a brief curtsy before taking her seat. "I've just come from the stables. Some magnificent horses running today. The 3-year-old in the second race, Thunder's Promise, looks particularly impressive." The conversation turned to breeding lines and racing statistics, topics that fascinated both women. Camilla listened intently, occasionally asking questions that demonstrated her growing knowledge of thoroughbred racing. Her hat remained perfectly still as she leaned forward with interest. Meanwhile, outside the royal box, television presenters prepared for their live broadcasts. Racing commentator Hugh Morrison adjusted his microphone as he prepared to describe the royal arrivals to viewers around the world. His camera operator focused on the royal box, capturing wide shots of the elegant gathering. "We have a perfect view of Her Majesty the Queen Consort today," Morrison spoke into his microphone during a practice run. "She's wearing what appears to be a Philip Tracy creation, absolutely stunning in ivory with exquisite detailing." Inside the royal box, staff members discreetly served afternoon refreshments. Delicate cucumber sandwiches, fresh strawberries with cream, and miniature scones were arranged on fine china plates. Crystal glasses filled with champagne were offered to the guests, the bubbles catching the light like tiny diamonds. Camilla accepted a glass of champagne and raised it slightly as Charles proposed toast. To a wonderful day of racing and to all the dedicated people who make Royal Ascot such a special occasion, he declared. The gathered guests raised their glasses in response, their voices creating a pleasant murmur of agreement. As the first race approached, excitement in the royal box intensified. Binoculars were distributed, race cards were studied more carefully, and conversations turned to predictions about the likely winners. Camilla adjusted her position slightly to get a better view of the starting gate, unaware that this small movement had loosened one of her hat pins ever so slightly. The afternoon sun continued to shine brightly, casting dancing shadows through the royal box windows. Everything seemed perfect for what promised to be one of the most memorable Royal Ascot days in recent memory. The first 3 races had passed without incident, with the royal party thoroughly enjoying the afternoon's entertainment. Camilla had even selected the winner of the second race, much to everyone's delight. Her confidence was growing, and she found herself leaning forward more frequently to get better views of the horses as they thundered past the royal box. As the fourth race approached, however, the weather began to show signs of change. What had started as a perfectly calm day was developing into something more challenging. Meteorologist David Richardson, monitoring conditions from the BBC weather station, noticed the barometric pressure dropping more rapidly than expected. "We're seeing some unexpected wind patterns developing," he reported to his colleagues. "The forecast called for light breezes, but I'm reading gusts that could reach 20 to 25 miles per hour within the next hour." In the royal box, the first hints of changing weather went largely unnoticed. A few paper napkins fluttered off tables, and some of the floral arrangements began to sway gently. Camilla felt a slight breeze touch her cheek and instinctively raised her hand toward her hat, though she didn't quite touch it. "Feels like the wind might be picking up a bit," observed Princess, and ever practical in her assessments. She glanced toward the windows where she could see flags beginning to flutter more vigorously than they had earlier in the day. Charles looked up from his race program with slight concern. "Perhaps we should check the weather forecast," he suggested. "Mother always said that Royal Ascot weather could be quite unpredictable." Lady Sarah Pemberton, still seated nearby, had already begun to feel the effects of the changing conditions. Her peacock feather fascinated her, while beautiful, was proving less secure than she had hoped. "I do hope this wind doesn't become too strong," she murmured, discreetly checking her own headpiece. The race commentator's voice crackled over the public address system as horses for the fourth race made their way onto the track. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a slight change in wind conditions developing, but racing will continue as scheduled. Spectators in the general enclosure may wish to secure any loose items." This announcement caught Camilla's attention more than it might have otherwise. She had been thoroughly enjoying the day and didn't want anything to disrupt the perfect atmosphere. Her hat, while securely pinned, was quite large and would certainly catch any significant wind. "Should we perhaps move to the indoor section of the royal box?" suggested one of the race officials who had noticed the increasingly restless flags outside. The royal box had both outdoor terracing and an enclosed viewing area that would provide protection from the elements. "Nonsense," Camilla replied with characteristic determination. "A little breeze won't hurt anyone. Besides, the view is so much better out here, and I want to see these magnificent horses properly." As if responding to her confident words, the wind suddenly gusted more strongly. Several ladies in the general enclosure below could be seen grabbing their hats, and a few loose programs went spinning across the grass. The horses on the track seemed unaffected, but their jockeys were beginning to notice the conditions. Margaret, Camilla's dresser, had remained discreetly nearby throughout the afternoon. She stepped forward now with growing concern. "Your Majesty, perhaps I should check the security of your hat pins," she suggested diplomatically. "With this wind developing, it might be wise to ensure everything is properly secured." "Don't fuss, Margaret," Camilla replied good-naturedly. "The hat feels perfectly fine." Philip Tracy designed it well, and you secured it beautifully this morning. I'm sure it can handle a bit of English weather. Unknown to everyone in the royal box, the combination of the hat's large surface area and the increasingly gusty winds was creating a potentially dangerous situation. The silk roses and feathers that made the hat so beautiful were also acting like small sails, catching every puff of air that passed by. Television director James Fletcher, coordinating the live broadcast coverage, was beginning to worry about the outdoor shots. Camera 2, can you give me a wind reading? He called into his headset. I'm seeing some movement in the trees behind the royal box that's making me nervous. His camera operator responded quickly. The flags are really starting to snap now, James. I'd estimate we're getting gusts of at least 20 miles per hour, possibly more. In the royal box, the mood remained cheerful despite the increasingly blustery conditions. Charles was deep in conversation with the racecourse chairman about the breeding programs that had produced the day's exceptional horses. Camilla continued to study her race program, occasionally looking up to watch the horses being led around the parade ring. The jockeys are having to work a bit harder in this wind, noted Princess, and ever the expert on equestrian matters. It's not dangerous, but it certainly adds an extra element to the race. As the horses lined up at the starting gate for the fourth race, the wind gusted particularly strongly. This time, Camilla definitely felt it. Her hat shifted slightly, and she quickly raised both hands to steady it. For a moment, she considered Margaret's earlier offer to check the hat pins. Perhaps after this race, she thought to herself, not wanting to create a fuss while everyone was focused on the action about to unfold on the track. She had no way of knowing that Mother Nature had other plans for the remainder of her afternoon at Royal Ascot. The fourth race was reaching its climax as the horses rounded the final turn. The crowd's excitement was building to a crescendo, with thousands of spectators on their feet cheering for their chosen horses. In the royal box, everyone leaned forward to get the best possible view of the thrilling finish. Camilla rose from her seat along with the others, her hands gripping the rail of the viewing area as she watched the horses charge toward the finish line. The wind had grown significantly stronger during the race, and she could feel it tugging at her elegant coat. Still, her focus remained entirely on the spectacular racing action unfolding before them. Come on, Thunder's promise. Princess and called out enthusiastically, her practical nature momentarily forgotten in the excitement of the moment. The horse she had recommended was Neck, and Neck with two others in a breathtaking three-way battle for the win. At that precise moment, as all eyes were focused on the horses, nature chose to make its most dramatic intervention of the day. A sudden gust of wind, later measured at nearly 30 miles per hour, swept across the royal enclosure with unexpected force. The gust hit Camilla's magnificent hat like an invisible hand. The wide brim, with its elaborate silk roses and delicate feathers, caught the wind like a sail. In an instant, the carefully secured hat pins were no match for the powerful force of nature. Her beautiful Philip Tracy creation lifted from her head as if it had suddenly decided to take flight. "Oh my goodness!" Camilla exclaimed, her hands immediately shooting up toward her head in a futile attempt to catch the escaping hat. But it was already beyond her reach, soaring through the air like an elegant bird seeking freedom. The hat performed a graceful arc through the space above the royal box, its silk roses and feathers fluttering dramatically in the wind. For a moment that seemed to last forever, it hung suspended in the air, clearly visible to everyone in the enclosure and to the television cameras that were broadcasting the scene live to millions of viewers around the world. Charles turned at his wife's exclamation, his eyes widening as he saw the situation unfolding. "Good heavens," he said, reaching out instinctively, though the hat was already well beyond anyone's grasp. Margaret, who had been standing discreetly nearby, gasped in horror as she watched her morning's careful work disappear into the wind. "Your Majesty," she cried, taking a step forward as if she might somehow chase down the runaway headpiece. Princess Anne, with her characteristic quick thinking, immediately assessed the situation. "It's heading toward the parade ring," she announced, her experienced eye tracking the hat's flight path. Someone down there might be able to catch it. Lady Sarah Pemberton instinctively grabbed her own hat, pressing it firmly onto her head as she watched Camilla's creation continue its unexpected journey. "This wind is absolutely dreadful," she muttered, though her eyes remained fixed on the spectacular sight of the Queen Consort's hat sailing through the air. In the television production truck, director James Fletcher's voice crackled over the communications system. "Camera 3, follow that hat. This is incredible footage." His operators scrambled to track the airborne accessory while maintaining coverage of the horse race that was still ongoing. Down in the general enclosure, spectators began pointing and shouting as they noticed the elegant hat floating toward them. Many raised their hands, hoping to catch the royal headpiece, while others simply stared in amazement at the unprecedented sight. "Is that the Queen Consort's hat?" asked Mrs. Jennifer Walsh, a regular Royal Ascot attendee who had traveled from Yorkshire for the day. She stood with her husband near the parade ring, both of them watching the approaching object with fascination. The hat continued its journey, performing lazy spirals as it descended gradually toward the racecourse grounds. The silk roses caught the sunlight, creating brief flashes of ivory and gold as the creation spun through the air. Photographers throughout the enclosure were clicking their shutters rapidly, capturing what would undoubtedly become some of the most memorable images in Royal Ascot history. Back in the royal box, Camilla had regained her composure with remarkable grace. Despite the shocking loss of her magnificent hat, she managed a rueful smile. "Well, that's certainly not something you see every day," she said with admirable calm, her hands smoothing her hair, which fortunately remained perfectly styled beneath where the hat had been. "Are you quite all right, darling?" Charles asked with obvious concern, moving closer to his wife's side. His own top hat remained secure, but he could see the wind was still gusting strongly. "Perfectly fine," Camilla replied, though she kept glancing in the direction her hat had traveled. "Though I do hope it doesn't cause any problems when it lands." That hat cost rather more than a small car. Security personnel throughout the racecourse had been alerted to the situation and were already moving toward the area where the hat appeared to be heading. Their priority was ensuring that any attempt to retrieve the royal accessory didn't create safety issues among the excited crowd below. As the hat made its final descent, heading directly toward a group of startled racegoers near the parade ring, everyone held their breath to see where this extraordinary Royal Ascot moment would reach its conclusion. The magnificent hat was now descending toward a group of surprised spectators gathered near the parade ring. Among them stood Colonel James Hartwell, a retired military officer and longtime Royal Ascot enthusiast who had attended the races for over 30 years. His quick reflexes from his army days served him well as he positioned himself beneath the floating headpiece. "Stand back, everyone," the colonel called out with natural authority, his arms extended upward as he calculated the hat's trajectory. "I believe I can catch it safely." The crowd around him stepped aside, creating a clear space as the precious hat continued its elegant descent. The silk roses fluttered like butterfly wings, and the delicate feathers created tiny whirlwinds in the air. Several photographers positioned themselves nearby, recognizing they were about to witness a moment of Royal Ascot legend. With practiced precision, Colonel Hartwell moved into position just as the hat completed its journey from the royal box. He caught it gently, but securely, cradling the delicate creation as if it were made of spun glass. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause, and several people called out, "Well caught," and "Bravo." "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the race commentator, who had been following the entire incident, "I'm delighted to report that Her Majesty's hat has been safely retrieved by a gallant gentleman in the parade ring. What an extraordinary moment in Royal Ascot history." In the royal box, everyone had watched the rescue with intense interest. Camilla clasped her hands together with relief when she saw her precious hat being safely caught. "Oh, wonderful! What a marvelous catch!" she exclaimed, her face lighting up with genuine delight. Security personnel quickly approached Colonel Hartwell, but he was already taking great care of his precious cargo. "This belongs to Her Majesty," he said respectfully, holding the hat as if it were the crown jewels themselves. I should very much like to return it personally if possible. Word quickly reached the royal box about the successful rescue and the colonel's request to return the hat personally. Charles immediately gave his approval for the gentleman to be brought up to meet them. Anyone who catches my wife's hat with such skill certainly deserves to meet her properly, he declared with obvious pleasure. Within minutes, Colonel Hartwell was being escorted through the royal enclosure by security personnel. He carried the hat carefully before him, checking repeatedly to ensure none of the delicate roses or feathers had been damaged during its unexpected flight. Remarkably, the hat appeared to be in perfect condition despite its aerial adventure. As the colonel approached the royal box, Camilla stepped forward with a warm smile. "You must be my hat's hero," she said graciously, extending her hand in greeting. "I cannot thank you enough for your quick thinking and excellent catching skills." "Your Majesty, it was my absolute pleasure," the colonel replied, bowing respectfully before carefully presenting the hat. "I serve in the parachute regiment, so I've had some experience with things falling from the sky, though nothing quite so elegant as this." The assembled guests laughed appreciatively at his wit, and Camilla accepted the hat with obvious relief. Margaret immediately stepped forward to examine it for any damage, her expert eye checking every rose, feather, and crystal detail. "It appears to be completely undamaged, Your Majesty," Margaret reported with evident relief. "Perhaps we might secure it a bit more firmly before you put it back on." "An excellent suggestion," Camilla agreed. "Though I think for the remainder of the afternoon, I might enjoy the freedom of feeling the breeze in my hair. This has been quite enough excitement for one day." Charles stepped forward to thank Colonel Hartwell personally. "You've saved the day magnificently," he said, shaking the man's hand warmly. "I hope you'll join us for refreshments. Anyone who rescues royal headwear certainly deserves some royal hospitality." The colonel accepted graciously, and soon found himself sharing champagne and conversation with the royal party. His quick actions had not only saved Camilla's expensive hat, but had also created one of the most charming and memorable moments in recent Royal Ascot history. Television presenter Hugh Morrison was already preparing his summary of the afternoon's events. What started as a perfect day for fashion at Royal Ascot became an unforgettable moment when Mother Nature decided to give the Queen Consort's hat a tour of the racecourse, he would later report. "Thanks to the quick actions of a gallant gentleman, all ended well in this delightful royal adventure." As the afternoon continued, the story of the flying hat and its rescue spread throughout the racecourse. Social media posts began appearing immediately, with photos and videos of the dramatic moment being shared around the world. The incident would be talked about in racing circles and royal watching communities for years to come. For Camilla herself, the mishap had turned into one of her most enjoyable Royal Ascot experiences. She spent the rest of the afternoon hatless, but happy, her hair styled perfectly despite the earlier adventure. The wind eventually calmed, but she chose to keep her rescued hat safely in Margaret's care rather than risk another aerial escapade. "Well, darling," Charles said as they prepared to leave at the end of the day, "I think it's safe to say this will go down as one of the most memorable royal Ascots in recent history." Camilla smiled as she looked out over the racecourse where thousands of people were beginning their journey home. "Indeed it will," she agreed. "And I learned something important today about the wisdom of listening to weather forecasts and trusting Margaret's advice about extra hat pins." The royal couple departed Ascot that evening with a wonderful story to tell, a slightly windswept but perfectly rescued hat, and the knowledge that sometimes the most unplanned moments create the most treasured memories. Colonel Hartwell had become an instant Royal Ascot legend, and Philip Tracy's beautiful creation had proven that even royal fashion could have its own adventures.